all so much for coming out. If you all remember when Dr. O'Donnell gave his welcome back address here in January when everybody was here at lunchtime, and he said, we're going to have a Life on Tap on the vocation of marriage. And then there was utter silence in the room, and I was like, oh no, I have made a very big mistake in planning this. Nobody's going to come. Nobody's going to want to be here or hear this stuff. So clearly I was wrong. So I'm very, very grateful that you all have come out to this one. And thank you to those of you who submitted questions ahead of time. Because we did that, and because I have so many questions, I only even put like 24 on here, and I had a lot more. So we're just going to stick to these questions tonight. We're not going to send the microphone around. So I apologize if your question doesn't get asked or your topic doesn't get covered. But hopefully, if you all have some energy after this, you can hang out for a minute and chat and maybe answer a question individually that you might have. Let's see, any other housekeeping stuff? Well, I have you a few things. One, next week is the last Life on Tap, next Wednesday, and we're going to have some administrative professionals come, which will be very exciting. I know that administrative professionals kind of get a bad rap, and we just think like, oh, they're just a secretary. No, they do so many other things, so we're excited to bring them to talk, so hopefully we will have a good crowd for them as well next week. Additionally, next Tuesday and Wednesday, I will be doing a workshop on how to buy a car. So if you are interested in learning all the things you need to know when it comes to buying a car, please come 4 to 5 p.m. in Thomas Aquinas, either Tuesday or Wednesday. So feel free to join me there. And then I'm trying to think if there's any other housekeeping stuff. I don't know. Thank you to Lauren and Jared for sitting on the front row. Appreciate you all. And Walter for coming up real close. Thank you. So, okay. Yay! Anthony's here. Okay, so let me introduce everybody. I think that a lot of you will know most of our couples here. So let's see, where are we? Jenna and George. Jenna and George Schuberg started dating in the fall of 2020. George spent the next semester in Rome, and they did long-distance dating, while Jenna finished her senior year on campus. Fast forward to 2022, George proposed in January, and 6 months later, they were married. They now live here in Front Royal and are expecting a baby in June. Yay! Okay, and then over here, we have Bridget and Anthony Storey. They met at Christendom and became close friends while working as summer program counselors over several years together. They began dating during the fall of Anthony's senior year and were married in the winter after Bridget graduated. They now live in Linden, where Bridget is a stay-at-home mom with their daughter, Diana, who is here tonight. And while Anthony works for a software company located in town, so we're very excited to have them as well. Okay, and last but not least, we have Elizabeth and Peter Santorum. You may know her as Eller, and she says, yes, you can still call her Eller. Let's see, you all met at Christendom in 2017, but you didn't start dating until just before graduation, right? Can't wait to hear that story. They were married here at Christendom on October 1st, and they now live in Ashburn. Peter is the senior project manager for Rose Roofing and Restoration, and Elizabeth works at the college with our benefactors. So, yes, welcome to them. Oh, excellent. Do you want to share? You can.
No. We are also expecting a baby in August.
Woohoo! That's very exciting. So the three of you can come back and we'll do a thing about being a mom. We'll do one of those. Okay.
And dads.
Then we'll do a dads. Yes, yes, George. We will not leave you out. Good call. Okay. So let's start. By the way, I sent them the questions that you all asked and a couple other ones that I had put in there because I wanted them to prepare a little bit, but I reordered them completely today. So I want to start with, because this is a question that I got a lot, and students want to know about dating, they want to know about getting married, etc., but they first want to know, how did you know that God's will was for you to get married and not single life or religious life? So who wants to start by sharing that? I know that's a big question to start with.
Sure. Do you want to like do a couple together, or like my story and then Jenna's story and then so on and so forth?
Whoever wants to speak.
All right,
if
cool.
You guys want to go first.
I've never dated before, Jenna, actually. Never asked anyone out, never gone on a date. So in a sense, it was very natural because like I didn't have to think about it very much. It was like, I don't know, kind of just knew. And I know that's cliche to say and everything, but it's not like, oh, I knew once I saw her. But we did start our friendship and everything, and it kind of naturally grew. And then I asked her out, and we went on a date, went on a few other dates, then we started dating, then we got engaged, and we got married. So, yeah, very natural progression. And yeah, I don't know. A lot of the times I think at Christendom, there's all the pressure to kind of be praying about your vocation and deciding your vocation, and everyone always asks, oh, are you going to get married? Are you going to be a priest? And it's a lot to think about. But for me, it was very natural. Yeah, I was thinking about the priesthood, but it wasn't like I had to make a decision right then. But it's also, you do pray about it all the time. You're like, number one prayer, I think, as a single person is praying for your vocation. So once Jenna came along, it was just very natural that we were going to be dating. And then after we've been dating for a while, it was, very clear that, she's my vocation. My vocation is to get married. So that's my story.
Okay. Yeah.
I would just say that, like, especially as Catholics and young women, everyone's like, okay, what's your vocation? And your vocation doesn't start until our wedding day when we were at the altar. So I feel like this idea of vocation, our little case V could be a lot of different things, but the uppercase is that day, is your wedding day. So it's a lot of discernment, a lot of prayer, but like George said, it's just so clear when it's that person, because it's the idea of marriage, but then it's that specific person that you are bonded to for the rest of your life, and then that's your vocation.
Thanks. Other thoughts?
When Anthony and I first started dating, I actually had a meeting with Father Pollard on campus for spiritual direction, because I was like, am I supposed to be dating this guy? Anyway, well, because it was going great, and I was very happy, but I was like, should I be a nun? But I'd only thought that because I was like, I haven't thought about this yet. Like, should I be thinking about this? And Father Pollard's like, why are you stressing yourself out thinking about whether or not you should be a nun when you're in a happy relationship? But that was his whole point of, like, if you're not, like, I was in a happy relationship and very at peace, and there was no roadblocks or stop signs making me turn and think spiritual life, other than me being like, I'm not thinking about all the options. And he made a good point of just, if you're in, like, a path of considering your vocation, whether it be like, oh, should I become a nun or a brother or a priest, or should I be, discerning a romantic relationship for marriage? If you're very at peace in that path and in that discernment, don't look for roadblocks when they're not there. And you're going to be stopped by a stop sign, metaphorically, in your life if God wants you to be discerning something else. So don't overthink it and stress out.
Easier said than done, I think. Yeah. Anything from the Santorums? Yeah.
I mean, I would say, like,
I don't know.
is this on? Okay, some people said no. I personally never, like, really deeply considered religious life. I just have always felt a very natural pull to marriage and motherhood my whole life throughout, kind of like a conversion and everything. So I kind of always knew that I wanted to get married, but I also found that the more that as I was at Christendom, I became more and more open. I was like, well, maybe I do have a vocation. And I felt less and less called to consider the vocation as I became more open to it, essentially. So I was kind of like, oh, I would totally be a sister if that's what God wanted, but it just kind of like Bridget was saying, God, you'll feel that pull if you need to feel that pull. But if you're dating or if you're single and just thinking, I want to get married, you don't have to, like, go visit all of the convents in the country. It's like, just God will lead you where you need to be.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Gentlemen, nothing? Okay. By the way, you all don't have to answer all the questions. So just pick and choose whatever you want to speak on. So the biggest theme that I saw from our students and what they want to know about is dating while they're here at Christendom. So the three of you, it sounds like, have very different dating experiences. So I would love to know if you can share just a little bit more about, I think especially the two of you, because I don't think we know as much, you didn't start dating until the very end of your time at Christendom. So are you comfortable sharing anything else about your dating life before you had met each other and what that was like?
I dated one other person at Christendom, and it was fine. We just didn't. So he was in a different class. None of you would know him, but like, that didn't work out. And I think
I was single going into senior year and kind of not really looking for anything, like purposely not looking for anything, totally happy being single. And I was looking for someone to ask to Sadie's, and I think I talked to Bridget about it even, which she helped me plan. I was like, okay, who's the one person that, like, no strings attached, super chill, like, nothing will happen. We're like, oh, Santa, of course. And so I asked him to Sadie's, and it was fine. Do you want to take it from there?
Yeah.
That is a true story. I literally...
I can attest to that.
Yeah. So my mindset was very different going into so yeah, I had sort of, thought she was cute for a while, and then she asked me to say this. I was like, oh my gosh, she kind of likes me too, but apparently she didn't. And then, so, asked her out on a date, and things kind of just
At the end of
went from
Sadie's,
there.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. And so, Peter, did you date anybody prior in previous years?
Dated somebody freshman year, and then, that's just kind of fizzled out. So.
As they do when they're not the right thing. Okay. All right. So, Bridget and Anthony, is there anything about before you met each other that you want to share about your dating life that the students might benefit from hearing?
Yeah, and this kind of ties back to the previous question you had talked about, like how do you know, I guess, is like I felt there, as opposed to I did date someone else for a long time at school before Bridget, and it's one of the first things I noticed when dating Bridget was like a very different feeling of just peace and like some said, like when you know it's right, it's like when it never feels wrong. Like it was just there was no like big sign. It was just like, oh, it kept being great. Like it was awesome when we first went out, and then 6 months later it was still good, and it kept being good, and then we got married. Like George said, like that was kind of like the sign of like, oh, like I just remember we had a conversation, probably maybe a year in, just being like, I didn't realize how peaceful this could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, could you say more about the question before?
That you answered all of it. You did great. Thank you.
Yeah, I dated somebody for a little bit for Anthony in my sophomore year, and it was kind of the classic, they say quote unquote Christendom dating. Like we really, really liked each other for like a year, and then we dated for like a month, and it like crashed and burned. Not saying that always happens, but it did. But we were both mature people, and we recovered, and we're actually good friends still. Anyway, but then flash forward a year later, Anthony and I had been working the summer program together for 2 summers, and I had no idea he liked me. And then he asked me out when we were doing RA training together, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, I know I can spend an hour with you in the van to the airport, so I can spend an hour with you over coffee. I didn't say that to him, but that was my mental process. Anyway, but it was a great date, and it was a very funny experience though, because I had a lot of respect for Anthony as a friend and as somebody I had worked with over 2 and very like intensive summers, which just I had a lot of respect and a lot of like just knowledge about him as like a coworker as well as a friend, which made me much more willing to go out with him, even though I had no like initial attraction of like, oh my gosh, yes, you're so hot, I'll go out with you. I mean, he's cute, but like it wasn't until a few dates in that I was like, oh wow, like yes, I obviously we fell in love and it was great, and yes, but I would say taught me a lesson of like, girls, you should not be afraid to say yes to a guy for a date if you like respect them and they're a good person, because you never know where it's gonna go, and a person sometimes deserves the time to just kind of, just tread the water and see if you guys work out, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. That's fine.
Just a quick note from my side too. It was not a situation where I was gonna like go be depressed for a month because she said no. Like it was kind of like a spur of the moment, like, oh, you know what? I've kind of thought about it a little bit this past summer, and sure, let's go ask her out, whatever. And she says no, she says no. And so just I guess she also a recommendation for the guys, like it's okay to ask your friend out. It's not going to ruin everything, if you're good friends with somebody. So.
Awesome. So I wanted to kind of, unless you all had something to share on this topic, but I would love to move to the advice for dating. And while just kind of on what you said before, Anthony, about wow, you didn't know how peaceful it could be. And I wanted to share a piece of advice that somebody gave me a long time ago when I was dating somebody, and everything I was telling her was just difficult. And she just looked at me and she said, it just shouldn't be this difficult. And so a couple months later when I met my husband, I called her and I was like, you're right, it's just not difficult. So like keep that in your mind too as you're going through the dating process and talking to people and meeting people and getting to know people. If you feel like you're constantly just like, it's just difficult, take that as a sign. Okay, do you all have any dating advice for students here?
Yeah.
George, with all your dating advice.
This might be cliche, but I would say definitely have your friends, like have your community. At Christendom, it's very, very easy to spend a ton of time with your boyfriend. You know, you eat together, you go to mass together, you have classes together, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And like, I wish I could go back to that in some ways, because that's just a very sweet, sweet time, and like savor that. But have your friends. You know, it's a whole community. I loved being in the girls' dorms. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I loved being an RA and seeing everyone and seeing them at night. Like that's part of Christendom, and that's your life here, and you have 4 years. So I would say savor those friendships.
Yeah, I've got a few notes here. I'd say number one, don't Christendom date. That's a dumb idea. Just
Tell us more. Tell us more, George, please.
yeah, I mean, like Anthony said, don't be afraid to just ask her out. Go if you're gonna do it. Don't half-ass something, and just play with the idea of being with someone and holding hands around campus and everything, and never actually committing to each other, because that's a bad way to start out a relationship, I think. So that's number one. Don't Christendom date. I think dating is like a really beautiful part of our relationship. It's just, you feel it so much, there's the flirting, it's just like, it's fun, you're going on dates, you getting to know each other, so appreciate that, because it's an amazing time to get to know someone, even if it's not the person, it's someone that you are spending time with intentionally, and you're doing that with the intention of getting married. And that's my point number 3. Don't date unless you're thinking about marrying the person. It doesn't have to be super serious, and you only ask someone if you're going, you're not going to get married in a few weeks. But that is the point of dating, is to get married. So don't go out with 5 different girls in 5 weeks. No, really think about if this is someone you can spend the rest of your life with. And if it's not, then don't ask them out.
Awesome. What other
That being
advice?
said, you don't have to know that you want to spend the rest of your life with someone before you go on a date.
Yes. I'm just saying, don't go on a date just because it's fun.
Right,
go on a
you
date
can't know that you don't
because you want to get
spend the rest of
married.
your life with him, but you don't have to know that you do.
I agree, yes.
See, this is why we didn't just bring one couple. We brought multiple.
Well, I would want to
Yes.
clarify a little bit. That was one of the other differences, was that in my first serious relationship, there was no point in about a year and a half that either of us could ever envision being married. And that was something we struggled with, and eventually we were like, this is probably a sign we shouldn't date. And so that was one of the reasons we ended up breaking up, is because when we first started dating, I think it was in the sophomore year, so it was it's so many years off. And then it was junior year, and then it was end of junior year, and it was, okay, so eventually we're going to have to think about this, and we could never get to that conversation. So that's, I think, what George is probably getting at.
Yeah.
That being said, when I asked Bridget out, I didn't have this whole plan of first we will date, and then it was just hey, she's cool, we're good friends, we seem compatible, let's go on a date.
Okay, awesome. Other dating advice that anybody else wants to share?
I think if you respect your friends and family and the things that they think about you and tell you with every other aspect of your life, it is really important what they think of your relationship too. And obviously there's exceptions to that rule, but I just remember when Peter and I started dating, everybody just loved it. And it was kind of random and nobody really saw it coming, but they were like, oh, it makes sense. And I think both of us are kind of like, oh, why didn't we think of this sooner? Totally makes sense. So definitely, if your friends and family think it's a really good thing, that's an awesome sign, I think. And if they have hesitations, don't be afraid to listen to them and at least consider them seriously.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, that goes back to what Jenna was saying too about how important your community is around you. One of the things I really prioritized once starting to date Anthony was prioritizing intentional time with my friends still. Because like Jenna said, it's so easy to spend almost 24/7 with your significant other, which is really weird. You shouldn't be able to do that in most any other environment. But it's really awesome because you're oh, this person's great, we're having a good time. But if you don't actually take time for your friends away from your boyfriend or girlfriend, if things don't go well in your relationship, whether you fight or you break up, you have nothing to fall back on, and you're going to be very miserable. So it's super important just to make sure, when you're not going out on a date or you're not with your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, you just make time to be like, hey, can we hang out? Like, to your friends who you used to spend all your time with before you were dating. Just to make sure you cultivate that and you maintain that, and they will also appreciate that. I had a lot of my friends were very grateful to me just for making sure that I prioritized their time and didn't just felt like I abandoned them because I'm dating now. So that's really important. And then those friendships hopefully will also blossom and continue once you do get married. And that's also important to have those good friendships outside of marriage. And you're going to thank yourself for taking that time to cultivate those.
Not exactly dating advice, kind of going in a different direction, but if you are dating and it's not the right person, you're going to break up. Breakups are not easy. You're going to feel very lonely and isolated, but don't hole yourself up in your room. It's very easy to do. That's what I did. Not fun. Just continue to be part of the community and just, be with your friends. And also, break up sooner rather than later, because that's not a good idea either. But yeah, just continue to live your life, essentially. It's not the end of the world.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing all of that. Okay, one last question about dating, because we're actually here to talk about them being married, so we're going to get to that point. So kind of the last question is, what do you recommend our students now talk to each other about while they're dating? What questions should they be asking each other? Are there things you think they should be talking about, conversations they should have, or questions they need to be asking each other while they're dating?
Yeah, Mr. McFadden's 101 questions.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
That was a joke, but in all seriousness, we did actually do that. We were in Ireland. We went to Columkill together. We'd only been dating for 3 months. We had a few drinks, and it was fun, and we decided to answer Mr. McFadden's questions. So those, legitimately, some of those are actually pretty good to talk about. Certainly not like a rite of passage or anything.
For those of you that don't know, Mr. McFadden has 101 questions to ask your future spouse.
I thought all of you knew.
False. It is 500 questions.
Oh, he added to it?
Each line of question is 4 or 5 questions in one. I have it. I can email it to you all. Don't you worry. I will send it out.
Legitimately, I was a fan. I think he usually only shares it with the men, but and it definitely asks things about how you're going to raise your children and things like that. So definitely not a first or a second or even a third date kind of thing to do. But if you're in a serious relationship, you know that you're discerning marriage. It's hey, why not? And some of them are fun, and you can do it jovially too, of course.
Yeah.
I think definitely asking questions about family is really big, and how, at least if family is important to you, asking them what their relationship with their family is like and how they want their relationship with their family to continue after they get married, and then how they envision running a family, essentially, because that's ultimately what you're going to be doing is running a family together and founding a family, as my father-in-law would say. So yeah, I would say definitely ask about their family and get to know their family, and just ask about smaller things too, past experiences, just kind of I don't know, get to know them, I guess. But don't feel like you have to ask them super deep questions right in the beginning.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there are many important questions that you should talk about over the course of your dating relationship, including family and whatnot. But I think just in general, I was thinking about this question beforehand, what kinds of questions do you ask? Opinion questions, and that sounds vague, but part of the conversations you're having are also to determine, is this person compatible? And if you both just are staying surface level or being just pleasing to each other in your conversation and just kind of stay, you never get anywhere, you're not going to learn about them. So I would just say opinion questions, what do you care about? Why do you care about it? So that could involve family traditions and whatnot, which are all wonderful conversations, but just questions that, well, do I love how this person thinks? Do I hate how this person thinks? Those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I feel practicals of that is asking what your prayer life is like, and how do you view God, and how are you praying? Because obviously we're all, one of the cool things about Christendom is most, if not all of us, are Catholics, and we all go to the Mass together. But you can't just assume somebody is like a perfect spiritual person just because they, you all go to mass together. Everybody has different spiritual lives deep within. So it's like, asking how you actually pray and how you converse with God is super important. And yeah, like Anthony said, like, don't back down about things that are like, how do you feel about this thing? It doesn't have to be controversial. It can be like, this soundtrack to this movie, you don't like it? Oh my gosh. And if that's like, a deal breaker for you, it's a deal breaker. Like stuff like that, where it's like, obviously that wouldn't be it. But like things that are like that, things that matter to you, like things that are important and you're passionate about, you should voice them, even if you're not trying to get an opinion from them, but just to be like, this is how I feel about this thing, and what do you think about that? And it should come up usually naturally, but like, yeah, you shouldn't back down, because it's easy in the honeymoon stage of a new relationship just to be like, oh, happy-go-lucky, everything's great, and like not actually talk about real important things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you all have other questions?
Yeah, I would say ask the big question and ask them earlier on, honestly. That doesn't have to mean dramatic and everything, but have conversations with each other, because the earlier you know if this is someone you can spend the rest of your life with, the easier it is to break up with them. So you want to find out earlier. You don't want to spend two years with someone and then find out that whatever they think this about something, and then all of a sudden you have to break up with them because you can't imagine spending the rest of your life with someone. It's easier in the Christendom community. But especially, if you're single after you graduate too, trying to find someone and you don't know what their political stance is, ask those questions sooner rather than later, because, who knows, maybe the person you're dating is abortion minded, and that, obviously that's going to be a deal breaker. Like I said, it's not going to be a problem with Christendom, but ask the questions early on, and don't be afraid to just have a conversation about it, because you want to know as much as you can kind of before you get so emotionally involved that you don't want to be with this person because of their whatever stances on something. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Okay. So I have kind of a fun question. Some of you all were kind of touching on this in regards to getting to know somebody before you start dating them, or while you're dating them before you marry them. Tell us what you've learned about each other since you've been married that maybe is very interesting and you didn't quite expect. And that could be, now that you've lived with them, you're like, I didn't expect you to do that, or whatever it is, or what have you learned about them, since that's very sweet and funny and endearing. Oh, Peter's on it.
One thing, she only likes watching British dramas. And she likes houseplants a lot. I did not know that.
Okay.
Yeah, she also a very good cook, which I enjoy a lot.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Nothing new? You guys found out
I'll be
everything?
honest, I feel like we knew each other pretty well. I think there is a cliche of like, oh, I had no idea who this person was, and you're 3 years into marriage, like, oh my gosh. I have not had that experience. I've not been surprised very much. I felt like I knew who you were before, and you've continued to be that person.
Mm-hmm. Anything?
When George was in Rome, his dad came out to visit, and so we went out for lunch. And we were pretty recently into dating. Everything was going great, and we're sitting down, and I said, well, is there anything you want to tell me about George? And he said, what you see is what you get. And so there's nothing new I could say. I mean, every day is such a joy. But there's nothing that surprised me, like, oh, that's how you eat. Like nothing, there's nothing like that at all. So, I mean, everyone's different, obviously, but I couldn't be more grateful for that, so.
That's awesome. Okay, so what about living together? Because something that is coming to mind, and I've shared it a couple times in various classes here, with my husband, I did not know that he squeezed the toothpaste tube from the middle, and that's a huge offense in my book. And so very quickly, I decided that we would have separate toothpastes forever.
That's a smart idea. I like that.
Yes, you should do that. So I'm just wondering if there's anything funny like that is like, oh, wait a minute, we're very different on this. It's such a random thing.
Yeah, I wonder if toothpaste is like a common thing. Everybody's different
Possibly.
opinions on. Because I remember when we first got married, I had because I lived in the apartment we got for like 3 months before we got married. And then Anthony moves in once we get married. And I had gotten this cute little toothbrush holder with 2 little holes for like his toothbrush, my toothbrush. I kept mine there every night, put it back there. His would never show up there. And I was like, he kept putting it in his drawer. And I was like, we're married. You can put your toothbrush next to mine. And we had a conversation about it. And eventually his toothbrush did come next to mine. So.
But at first I was like, well, no, that's gross.
So I brought toothbrush covers to put over our toothbrushes so it wouldn't be gross if they're sitting next to each other. Anyway, now our toothbrushes are happily nested next to each other, so it's all good. But yeah, I will say there's like I can't think of other examples right now, but there's tons of like tiny stuff like that sometimes. But it's not unlike when you move in with a new roommate at a dorm in a sense. You kind of have to learn each other's just like little things about how you live, and you kind of make compromises, and nothing that's been like, oh my gosh, we like have to sleep in separate rooms now. I can't do this anymore. No, but there's always little things.
Yeah. We have some discussion going on. Go ahead.
I think I will say I found it much easier. This might just be a testament to Peter. It's been much easier to live with Peter than it has with like female roommates. Like living with a lot of other and I loved my roommates. Like I never had a horrible roommate experience, but like I had just heard so many people like, oh, you're gonna have to adjust to living with a man. And it's like, well, okay, I grew up with brothers, so like, you know, none of the man stuff was a surprise necessarily. And like, yeah, it was actually there. I was expecting it to be a lot more of a like a hard adjustment or just funny little things to happen. That it's been pretty normal, I'd say.
Yeah, nothing unexpected for me either. I was very upfront about the fact that I brush my teeth in the shower, so she knew that ahead of time. It was all good there. The toothpaste is a problem. She's a little bit messier with the toothpaste than I like to be. But that's about it, I think.
I opened quite the can of worms. Okay. Okay, so let's turn a little bit more serious, I guess, but possibly a question that our students have is, what is marriage prep really like? What does it entail? What are the conversations you're having? Tell us about the process. And did everybody get married here at Christendom? I don't know.
We did. We did Father Pecorski for marriage prep, so different priest in the same diocese.
Okay.
He's great.
Yeah.
So to answer that question, based on what I've heard what it's like with other priests, it totally depends on the priest. We, I think, had 4 sessions, kind of like one of them was a theology lecture about marriage. Another one, a few others, we went over there's like a survey that everybody has to take in this diocese. So we went over that and all of the answers, but overall it was pretty easy. I think if you get a priest that's not from Christendom and he hears that you're from Christendom, he'll kind of take it easy maybe. So that was our experience. Do you have anything to add? It was, yeah, I think we went 4 times. It really was not super intensive. And it was great.
Yeah, I definitely have heard a wide variety of things. I had a good friend of mine who's actually my best man. He and his wife, their priest literally said, oh, you went to Christendom, you're fine. And they were like, well, we still need formation, though. So they still had formation. But we performed here with Father Pollard, and I was very enjoyable for me. I feel like many of the things we talked about, it was just more of what we'd already talked about before, because, once again, I don't think we've ever, I think we've been pretty upfront with each other the whole time. Yeah, I think it's great. Father Pollard has a great plan. The marriage prep weekend is take it or leave it for me.
Leave it.
Required retreat within the diocese you have to do.
Yeah.
Oh, just to add to that, Father Pollard is really excellent with marriage prep with his plan. But like Anthony said, we were very open and honest with each other in our relationship, so there wasn't much that was new coming out in marriage prep. But I will say, especially when you have a very thoughtful priest like Father Pollard, if there are things you have hidden from your significant other that you're looking to marry, that will come out in marriage prep, and that can be uncomfortable. And so it's something to think about of if you're going to marry this person, there shouldn't really be things you're hiding, especially things that are important. And you have a lot of open, honest conversations, things that are aren't necessarily fun, like finances and how do you deal with that? And nobody wants to talk about that. But also things like, trauma in your life and serious sins that you experience consistently throughout your life and things like that. So again, if that's something you're not upfront and willing to talk about, then you're going to have a hard time. And maybe it's one of those things that just hasn't come up yet, and marriage prep allows that to come out. So if you haven't talked about it, don't be like, oh my gosh, we can't get married because I haven't talked about this. It's more if you're just unwilling to and hiding that. That's it's probably not a good place to be in, and you should work through that.
Yeah, we had Father Pollard, and we were married at the chapel. I really appreciated Father Pollard's practical questions. That's very Father Pollard. So I enjoyed that part of it, but I think overall I was a little underwhelmed with the diocese required weekend and things like that. And I don't know if that's coming from our Christendom education. It wasn't anything that we hadn't ever heard before. So I think that was a little underwhelming. And also, misconception, it doesn't take that long. We were done very quickly. And I don't know if that's a very Father Pollard, let's do this. But I want to say we were done within 3 months of being engaged. And our engagement was 6 months long. So for 3 months, you're like, oh, well, I guess it's time to get married.
And Father Pollard was like, so why aren't you getting married like next week now? And we're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Should we?
I'm glad you guys answered like that, because in my opinion, if you're a good couple, then you won't get anything out of marriage prep, kind of. If you're getting something huge out of marriage prep, then it's like, okay, you weren't talking about the right things when you were dating. You're not really prepared to be married if you haven't talked about these things, kind of a thing, in my opinion. Same thing about the marriage weekend thing. It's required by the diocese. It's good for a lot of couples, but if you're a couple at Christendom, odds are that you're not going to get anything out of that either. So good, like the first thing you do with marriage prep is you go through this billion questions that you and your future spouse do separately, and then they're combined, and it shows your compatibility. So some couples get like a 50% compatibility, and some get 90. So it really depends. I don't know if it really means much, but you get a percentage, and we were an A. I don't know if that means anything, but
Top of the class.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay. So now let's get actually kind of serious. Is what has been the toughest part about being married? And then I will ask the other side what's been the most joyful. So it won't be all.
I mean, for us, and I would imagine it's similar for you all as well. But I feel like once you go from like marriage is great, and your honeymoon, and then you're together. But if you have decided to have a child right away, and if you are able to get pregnant right away, that quickly becomes very difficult, because now neither of you are like you were before. You're no longer you're not only in a new vocation together, which has all its own unique challenges, but now there are just day-to-day difficulties that you are experiencing. So that I feel like was quite difficult. And then of course, I would say the most difficult day is like the day your child is born. That's a rough day. But then it's a great day. But for me, that was probably the hardest part, was just getting through that process.
Sure.
I was definitely going to say, and obviously, I mean, we're still less than halfway through the pregnancy, but the first part was really hard. And so in some ways, we were like, wow, kind of grateful we didn't have a honeymoon baby. But and it totally depends on the person, but it's like I literally couldn't walk in the kitchen and cook anything for 6 weeks, so Peter had to step up, and it was great, and like Peter's been awesome, but it's just hard because he comes home from work and I'm like on the couch wanting to die, and like can't, and then he cooks something and it smells weird and I can't eat it. So like there are things like that are difficult, but it hasn't made like the marriage difficult, and it hasn't made us be like, wow, we don't like being married, but it's just kind of life, and life isn't easy, and so there's things like that, but I wouldn't say it's like, obviously it's connected to marriage because you're not going to have a kid before you're married, God willing. But it's not, it doesn't make you question whether you should have married them or not.
Okay.
Yeah, like what Eller said, I wouldn't say being pregnant has made our marriage tough. I think almost conversely, it's shown me a different side. Like, I mean, your husband has a servant heart, and he's doing all of these things for you, and he's cooking for you. But I don't think that's a hardship in marriage. I just think it's a new version, and it's a new side of your spouse.
Yeah, I think just one thing I'd add is when you get married and then you're pregnant right away, it's hard financially because you're losing an income and you're having a baby. So I think financially it's a little bit hard, but yeah, I don't know. First year,
I would definitely agree with that. It's like the second one, and this is true of marriage regardless of if you have your a child right away, is just all of a sudden now your finances are not just your own, or especially if you're married soon after college, they're not just ethereal. They're like, oh, this is what we have. or we will die.
Yeah.
And so just like being serious and having consistent budget conversations, like that is definitely our least favorite conversations weekly is budget.
Yeah, I'd say financial discussions are definitely like the headache of marriage, I feel like, in a certain sense. And like thankfully if you marry somebody you really love, you work through it together. But yeah, when you get married, it's not only both your incomes you now have to handle, and it's their money as well as yours you have to now use responsibly. If you have any student debt, it's both of your debt now. Like if one of you didn't have debt and the other one has debt, or both had debt coming in, it's combined now, and you both are responsible. And that's a lot to take on and a lot to have to accept and or let the other person accept, and it's just a hard conversation to have. And it never goes away. Like the finances, I mean, hopefully the debt, yes. But no, I mean, like your entire life in marriage, you're gonna have to be responsible for your finances and the choices you make and the ways you save or not save and spend or not spend.
No? Do you have something else to share? Oh, okay. Saw the passing of the mic. Okay, so conversely, what has been the most joyful or surprisingly happy thing happy part of your marriage so far?
Babies.
Yeah.
Babies.
Yeah, being pregnant. It's been the worst and the best. Also, I think just aside from that, like the default is being together, so just not having to make an effort to see each other anymore. So it's like, when I go out, I come out to Front Royal fairly often because most of my girlfriends are here, so it's like I'll come out for work and, stay out all day, and then it's like, that's fine because, I can go home to Peter at night and then we'll be together the next morning. So it's, I think just not having to make an effort to see each other is super nice.
Okay.
Yeah, but definitely having kids. Like having a baby is definitely like the hardest thing you will ever do as a married couple, and like parenting like transforms you in ways you never thought. But it is also the most joyful part of your life. And yeah, it's funny when you hear people who don't have pro-life mindsets and they're like, oh, kids are just stressful and a stress on life. And it's like, yeah, they are. But like nothing compares to having a child and knowing that child is yours and that child smiling at you and knowing that this is a soul that God has gifted to you to raise. Like that is the most beautiful, most wonderful blessing you could ask for in life. So, yeah.
I'd say that, when you're dating and when you're engaged, you're always trying to spend more time together, and you're kind of trying to not spend as much time together because it can be unhealthy. And then you get married, and then you spend all your time together. So that's just a kind of complete release, and that you are just with the person that you want to be with all the time. You couldn't really be. It was unhealthy to be when you were dating and when you were engaged. And now when you're married, it's healthy to be with each other. So I think that's just, a complete joy in marriage that you don't experience in dating or when you're engaged.
Yeah, it's the day-to-day, that's your life. I mean, that's your beautiful life, and that's something that's much anticipated in your single life, and your dating life, and your engaged life, and then all of a sudden you wake up and it's like, I'm married, and this is what it looks like, and it's in the big things and it's in the small things. But I think that's the most joyful part.
Awesome.
Yeah, again, a lot of it just comes down to the small things, but also one thing I found joy in that I really wasn't expecting was just doing things for her, essentially, just like, having the kitchen clean or making the bed or vacuuming or whatever it be. That's actually something I find joy in, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Not to piggyback, but I will definitely agree. But I remember thinking, I can't remember if this is when you were pregnant or this is when we were up with her at some point, but I remember being like sacramental grace is a real man because I'm way more helpful than I normally am. I was like, wow, I got out of bed like this. Like, how did that happen?
No, I will say, like, the graces that come from marriage, yeah, especially when you have a baby and you're up at 2 a.m. out of nowhere and you're suddenly making cognizant decisions. You're like, how is this happening? This has to be God. It's true. It's literally true.
All right. So a question that was submitted by a student is, what does it look like for the husband to be the spiritual leader of the family? And then also with that, how do you find time to pray together?
Honestly, I thought it was easier to find time to pray together when we were dating, and it's more of a struggle when we're married to find that time. That being said, when we do find that time, it's more beautiful and everything in marriage, and going to adoration together, going to mass as a family together, it's a huge joy. But I think it is harder when you're when you're married and you have full-time jobs and you're coming home and you have dinner and then I don't know, life just happens, I feel like. Whereas when we were dating in Christendom, so easy because we could go to mass together. Like, it was natural to just go for a walk and take a study break and pray the rosary. So I feel like it's harder, and you have to be more intentional when you're married, because it's a classic thing. Once you graduate from Christendom, you have to work so much harder in your spiritual life than you do when you're a student, because you're surrounded by like-minded people that are going to mass every day and praying all the time, and it's just not as easy when you graduate, whether you're single or married, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I work right across the street from St. John the Baptist and find it very difficult to make it to daily mass. How? I don't know. But it's just how my life has, how your day gets so busy. And I would very much agree. It's like you get very tired, especially once you guys are pregnant. So you're already very tired, but you'll get more tired. And I'm saying is it's as easy as you think it is now, hitting your dorm bunk bed, do like, oh, I forgot to pray. Like, that was pretty easy because you had a lot of stuff to do that day. But like, it just gets that only gets harder. So I'd say that what's it like to be the husband, the leader, is like this is an opportunity that I found to be like, oh, this is a time to actually be serious about faith life, and like in a good way. And I really enjoyed when we do have a consistent prayer life. Like, it feels really good, very rewarding. Like when you're we're making it to confession on a consistent basis, and we're especially in that we've made a big effort to pray morning, pray at night. I was like, dang, it feels really good.
You don't have to answer, it's okay. No pressure.
I don't know. I mean, I agree with what they say, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of an adjustment, because beforehand you're just sort of worrying about yourself and your own soul, but now you have another person two other people to worry about. So it's it definitely takes a lot of effort, and I've definitely not hit the nail on the head every single time, and you forget to say the rosary, whatever. But yeah, just keep getting on it. If you forget to pray, don't be all sorry for yourself. Just get back on the horse and pray.
Sure. Okay. Another question, and as much as you all have painted such a beautiful picture of what marriage has been and how joyful and all the things, I can imagine that maybe there have been some arguments at some point, right? You have disagreed about something. So the people want to know, how do you mitigate friction in a new marriage? How do you make up after you do have a disagreement? And what have you learned from the process of having to resolve those issues?
Well, it really sucks when you fight. I'd say Anthony and I are pretty good at, we make a really big effort if we do get into an argument and a fight, and obviously things get heated and emotional, to, one of us hopefully will kind of take a step back and realize that things are just kind of emotional at this point and not a reasonable conversation anymore. And we usually both make an effort to just kind of apologize, even if we're not being super honest and genuine in that moment, just to be like, I'm sorry, and I realize this has kind of gotten out of hand. We should just stop this conversation now and come back to it when we're both kind of a little bit calmer. Or even if we don't say that, we know that when we both are like, look, I'm sorry, we should just not talk about this right now. And then usually one or both of us, a couple hours later, or at the end of the day, we'll reapproach the conversation being like, oh yeah, I was really feeling this way and I wasn't saying that, or oh, this other thing was bothering me, or it was really, really sweaty in there, so it's another reason I was just feeling upset, or whatever. Especially when you're pregnant, a lot of it's just, I'm just so tired. Anyway, so just to be able to realize that, you can stop a conversation and come back to it, and to both make an effort to apologize and admit that, oh yes, I was just being unreasonable, and these are the reasons I was feeling overly emotional, and these are the things I'm actually thinking and wasn't expressing before, or feeling and wasn't expressing before. Yeah, just being really honest with each other and with yourselves, and that takes a lot of maturity to do. And also I think we both do a pretty good job of apologizing, even if, maybe it wasn't my fault that this actually happened, but part of the reason we got in a big argument is probably my fault, and admitting to that part.
Yeah, I was just say that the question would involve like how do you avoid friction? Because I do think most friction in a day-to-day relationship like marriage is not when you guys are like arguing all the time. Because again, hopefully you've already weeded out people who you're going to argue with like and disagree with constantly. But it's just things that annoy you, and like you said, sometimes there's reasons to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I was feeling this way because of this. Sometimes it's like, I was grumpy that you said that. And so sometimes it's just like, I was just being grumpy and I'm sorry about that. So it's, I agree. A lot of times it's just, there's no argument, there's no necessarily like who wins or loses. It's just like, oh, I was like, most friction comes if one person was just being rude or selfish and just quipped it in a way that they just let it out. And you're like, we found it's been very helpful to, as soon as you recognize that you did that, just be like, hey, I'm sorry for that, even if it didn't matter. Because a lot of times a friction moment happens, and like both of you are mature enough that's like, oh, that was annoying and rude and that bothered me, but now we're gonna do something else, and you just move on. But if no one apologizes for that, then those build, and I think that's what causes larger arguments. So again, we found it easy just to, not easy, we found it helpful to just apologize as soon as you can, even for very small things.
I was going to kind of similar, just don't let the small things bother you. And like, I feel like thanks to God or Peter or whatever, I've just like become more tolerant of little things that would have bothered me so much. And I probably would have like picked a fight about them, especially during engagement, I think. But then now it's like, well, you're locked in for life. So if he like wipes his toothpaste on the wrong towel, it's fine. Like, it's not going to hurt anything. You just got to let it go. So letting it go is probably like one of the biggest things. And then also if it's, slightly more serious than toothpaste on a towel, don't let things build up. Like, make sure you bring them up that day. Like, maybe not right that moment if you're, in public or doing something, but definitely like, don't let things build up. If it's something that you really think, it's not virtuous for me to let this go, I should bring it up. Don't wait to bring it up, because that's only going to make it worse.
Anything from?
Yeah, we don't argue very much, honestly, and it's funny because if you know me, I argue a lot. But Jenna is just so sweet and innocent that she doesn't really like argue back, so it's not really worth it for me to argue to her. We don't argue very much. I think maybe one of the times we argued most was about how to load the dishwasher. She's been really stubborn about it. Okay, I'm the kind of person that washes all of the dishes before putting it in the dishwasher, so like all the food is off of it. And she just puts everything with all the food on it right into the dishwasher, and I don't think that's okay. And she started crying and everything. It wasn't good. But that was the night we found out she was pregnant, so that was why.
I was crying because I was pregnant. Also, it's called a dishwasher, so it will wash for you. You don't have to rinse your bowls.
I have to say, just to weigh in very quickly. We have lived in 2 apartments with 3 dishwashers between the 2 of them. It really depends on the dishwasher.
That's a fair argument.
That's very
they
true.
can get really gross if you leave food on the plate.
Yes.
Sorry, Jenna.
Something to add on more of the serious note. I will say, when you learn how to, mitigate friction, and also just like how you handle things interiorly with, things you disagree with your significant other or your spouse, it's very important that you don't complain about your spouse and gossip about your spouse. And that's surprisingly an easy thing to do if you're like, oh my gosh. I know obviously we're like joking about things here, but like if you were to legitimately say something that, was an actual serious argument about your spouse, like gossiping about it in a way to your friends kind of offhandedly, it's important to maintain a respect for your spouse of like where things belong as far as in your relationship. And maybe sometimes if you're having a hard time getting over something or something that you're fighting about with your spouse, the place to cope with that is not in gossiping and laughing about it with your friends. It's in maybe being vulnerable with somebody you're very close to and you trust their opinion of, or a spiritual director or a family member. It's very important that you keep that line of like, I respect this person and I don't actually want our troubles to be the news of my entire friend group. So.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and another thing is when arguments arise or something comes up that just sets you off, a good thing to do is don't snap, don't get all red-faced, whatever. Take some time, bring back your rationality, think it over. Most of the time, you're going to realize it was absolutely nothing, and it's fine.
Okay. So Somebody submitted a question asking what resources, whether they're podcasts, books, different speakers that you know of, were helpful in preparing for marriage or have been helpful since you've been married, if any.
I think most of the resources we had were friends and family. We were kind of later on in the big, in every, like, in our class, we were kind of later on in getting married. So we had a lot of other people to look through who were going through getting married. And yeah, just talk to your family about it a lot. They have a lot of, good things to offer.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of looking for some, great book or something to prepare you for marriage. A lot of what I think Father Pollard recommended were more spiritual books, I thought. I was kind of looking for something more practical. Wasn't able to find it, though. So if you find something, let me know.
Okay.
I took theology of the body while I was at Christendom, and that was really awesome. So I highly recommend that if you have a chance to either sit in on that class or even just go to Mrs. Stanford's office hours to talk to her about theology of the body. I found that to be a really wonderful. I didn't take it when I was engaged. I took it either before we were dating or when we started dating. And I don't think I even realized how wonderful of a course it would be as far as just like helping me form a lot of how I would think and pray and consider relationships, both with, my future spouse and also God. But there's also a lot of good books on theology of the body. One I really highly recommend is, I think it's called like 1 Hour with Theology of the Body. It's by Jason Everett. But it's a super short little booklet. And if you ever interested in reading anything about theology of the body, that's a really great one because it kind of just gives you like good little snippets to think about. But I found that a really good foundation for just thinking about relationships and especially how they work into your spiritual life.
That's a great point. That class, Theology of the Body. Then there's Domestic Church with Dr. Viner. That's an awesome one to take as a kind of a marriage prep type of thing. And Family Household, Dr. Cutterback. So there's 3 classes right there that are like awesome. Like if you're engaged, I think I took all 3 of those when I was engaged, and just like that was great.
Yeah, I will agree with especially the theology of the body stuff. I never took the class, but I listened to, there's Justin Everett and Christopher West are 2 great resources on those topics. Both of them have podcasts where I listened to many episodes of, I think before we were married or soon after we were married. I can't remember, but I remember like just finding them as great wealth of resources. And both of them also have interviews on Pines with Aquinas if everyone listens to that. So if you're interested in that kind of topic, you can kind of browse those things. You mentioned I didn't Christendom classes. I remember taking Cutterback's friendship class, which was like kind of inspiration for me to end my other relationship.
That is a good reason to take these classes as well, yes. Good things come out of them. Okay. Oh, do you have something?
But in general, yeah, like you said, too, like friends and family. If you have friends that you trust and that you can talk to about your relationship, and also we went out with a couple of different married couples, I think, while we were dating and like newly married. And like older, like a married couple that have been married for a while. And that really helps because you can just kind of like talk honestly about things, about like what to look for in marriage and how to, all these questions actually answering right now. They've got a lot of wisdom too because they've been married for 10 plus years. Yeah.
Okay. So somebody asked about personality and temperament, and how do you think that your personalities kind of are compatible, and does that tend, let me reword this. People were asking, do you feel like your personality types and your temperaments make you more successful in your relationship or have helped you be more successful? Or have you literally given it 0 thought?
I think they do, but I don't think that there's specific personalities that have to go together by any means. So I think any 2 personalities can work. And like before we started dating, I was very concerned because Peter, as far as I knew, didn't talk, and I talk a lot. So I was just thinking, I'm just going to be way too much for him. Like, there's just no way. And that obviously, wasn't a problem, especially once I met his family, and I was like, oh, okay, well, they're even more than I am. So now I understand. Like he knows he'll be able to handle it. But I think it's, we're kind of, I guess, a case of opposites attract because he's an introvert and I'm an extrovert. But when it's just us together, it's like, sure, I probably talk more, but I think all women talk more. But it doesn't feel like there's this horrible imbalance of like, Do you feel like there's an imbalance? I don't feel that way. So I think personality types, it's totally fine if you have different, and it's probably fine if you're the same. People are so much more than their personality.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's always interesting and can be great conversations and great areas of interest or study to see, like whether it's Myers-Briggs or the temperaments or Enneagram or whatever. It's like what ways how am I like this? How is she like that? But yeah, I mean, I'd say you guys are more different. Bridget and I are more similar. You guys are probably a little bit more different as far as just like base personalities. But I've never heard any of that like conventional wisdom that has applied to applied universally. Opposites attract sometimes. People who are the same sometimes. Like it just depends.
Yeah, I would say I'm really grateful for our balance, and I think that you bring out a lot of good qualities. I don't feel like I talk that much, but I think that there's a beauty to where I fall short. You know, he comes in, and I think that's just really beautiful.
And vice versa.
Absolutely. Okay, this was an interesting question. What does a day in the life of being married look like for you all as a couple?
We wake up in the morning. We have coffee. She likes to get up a little earlier and have some kind of downtime in the morning to have coffee. She goes to work a little earlier than I do. Then I leave like 15 minutes later than she does. Then we work all day, come home, relax for a little bit, make dinner, have someone over if we have someone over, and yeah, it's very, just everyday life.
Okay, excellent.
Ironically, I think Bridget does more in the day than I do, even though she's like, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm like, yes, but you're doing a lot of things. Get up, go to work, and I come home. And then we have dinner, and occasionally I'll do something else. But I feel like you're doing a lot more things during the day.
I guess. Yeah, I mean, our day usually starts at sometimes 4 a.m., sometimes 6:30 a.m., depending on my alarm clock that I made that you can hear out there. So, yes. So, depending on, a lot of our life depends on Diana's schedule, unfortunately. Well, also fortunately. But actually, Anthony a lot of times gets up with her first thing in the morning so that I can sleep a little bit. So if she's getting up at like 6:30, Anthony picks her up and goes plays with her for a bit, which is nice. But yeah, Anthony usually gets up and gets ready for work while I take care of the baby, and I like make him lunch and things, and we'll eat breakfast together sometimes, depending on how things are going. And he goes to work, and yeah, I spend my day at home taking care of our baby, which is its own cycle of awake and nap time and awake and nap time and her nap time, not my nap time. But yeah, surprisingly, stay-at-home life I thought would be more like, what am I going to do with myself all day? But it is a lot of, taking care of a child and hopefully more children in the future, and a lot of laundry and sweeping and vacuuming and but also like that's what I wanted. I love taking care of our house, and like today I do in the day thinking, wow, I actually did a lot of stuff. Like I made applesauce and bread and dinner, and I was like, whoa. I like finished it, and I was like, am I a housewife? Yeah. And also texting Eller all day. But yeah, and then yeah, we usually end the day with dinner, and we try to say night prayer and sometimes watch a movie together, or we have a game of rummy that's been going on for months between us two. I'm currently winning. Yeah, sometimes I have people over. Yeah. I might actually go check on her.
Okay, yeah, we're going to wrap up here in a minute anyway.
Ours is similar. Wake up. I will say being married isn't necessarily going to make you, I thought I would just be so much cleaner and keep the house perfect and like get up earlier every day, and that just didn't happen, but that's fine. But yeah, we get up, Peter usually makes breakfast because he likes breakfast more than I do. Go to work. I work from home sometimes I come here, so my schedule's kind of different every day. If it was a day that I'm working from home, before I was pregnant, couldn't cook, I would always have dinner ready. Lately, Peter usually makes dinner when he comes home and I'm on the couch. And then, yeah, we'll, like, watch a show or clean, a lot of cleaning and laundry, just because that's life. And last night, we decided to draw portraits of each other just for fun. So you can do fun things like that, too, and it was hilarious, but also kind of, apparently I look like an old maid. So, yeah, and then just, say night prayer, pray the rosary, go to bed.
Awesome.
I go out, at least me, I don't know. I go out a lot less now that I'm married, which I actually enjoy so much. It's like much more stable, and just life is a lot more chill, which is great.
Yeah, I said one overall note is I have very much enjoyed just like the habit and the schedule of every day. It's like, I before very much struggled to commit to anything weekly, but now it's like, well, my weeks are very the same every week. So if I want to go to Bible study on Wednesday, I can like do that now because I know what my life is like.
Sure. Okay. So I have greatly appreciated all of your stories, you all being vulnerable enough to sit up in front of 200 students and share these different stories. So I really, really appreciate it. I want to ask, is there any last words that you wanted to say that we didn't get to cover, that you were hoping a topic we would cover, et cetera? Do you want to say to wrap things up?
Just to go back to I thought I had earlier with the dating questions of like, when is it? Because I don't know if about y'all, but I have heard this question 1 million times as a student, like, I don't know if it's like God's will that we should date, or like, is it God's will? Is it God? Like, okay. God's will is for you to be a good person and happy. Okay. So if you're dating and you're being a good person and you're happy, then it's God's will. If you're dating and you're not being a good person and you're not happy, then it's not God's will. And that's not to say that God's will is whatever you think it is. It's like if you are being virtuous and you are happy, then that's the correct path to be on. That's all I want to say.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd go back to Jenna's point before about dating too, like just spending so much time together, especially if you're both on campus. It's a hardship in a sense because you kind of realize that you shouldn't be spending every moment of your lives together because you're dating and you're not married. Even when you're married, like you don't spend that much time together because you're working, and like even if Jenna's not working once the kid comes, I'll be gone all day, so we won't be seeing each other. Whereas when you're dating and you're both on campus together, if you're going to classes together, lunch together, mass together, then you're studying all night together, like don't spend so much time with each other. Go out with your guy friends and do fun things. And girls, go do whatever you do in your dorms and talk to each other. I don't know. But just don't be spending so much time together, because I think that is important. And I think I saw it a lot, I think, at Christendom, where just like, wow, okay, yeah, whenever I see that person, he's always with her. And kind of a bummer because you almost lose some friends too, and you shouldn't really do that when you're dating. And to a certain extent, I think you should lose some friends when you're married because it's a completely different lifestyle, but dating, not so much.
Especially after hours. Just minimize it.
It's 9 o'clock, people.
I would say, like, don't be afraid of marriage. It's just, like, really fun, honestly, because you're just hanging out with your favorite person all the time, and, like, after dinner, you're like, what do we want to do tonight? We could go look at Christmas lights, or we could watch a movie. Like, you can do anything you want any night, and you can spend the whole night together. Like, it's really fun. And then, so yeah, don't be afraid of marriage. Like, I don't know, I was expecting it to be like really hard in the beginning for some reason, and it just hasn't been. So that was good. And then the second thing is, like, while you're dating and engaged, don't be afraid to use your head and your heart. Like, I was really nervous for a lot of engagement. But I knew, I was like, well, there's no red flags. Like, obviously, I'm not saying that I wasn't at peace, but it's like, it was a hard time in life. I relocated. I lived by myself for 5 months, which I had never done. I wasn't in Front Royal with my friends anymore. So it was a hard time of life, and I was nervous about being married. But then it's like, you can use your head. You don't have to trust every feeling you have every time. So use your head and your heart. And then once we got married, it's been so great, and it's like super fun. So
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you all so much, seriously, for giving us your evening, and especially Anthony and Bridget for bringing your daughter, who is tired, I think, probably. Again, thank you all so much for coming out and staying. It seems like you guys have actually stayed here the entire time, which is amazing, so I appreciate that. If anybody is able to stay after to help put the commons back together so that you can have breakfast tomorrow morning, we would greatly appreciate that. Our guests will hang out for a couple minutes to chat individually if you all have time and energy to do that. So give them a big round of applause, and thanks for being here.